Afternoon to all our delegates in Kenya, Uganda, and Zambia, and good evening to all our delegates in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Cambodia. Mankind Pharma welcomes you all to this live multinational webinar on telehealth practice the new normal. As the world braces for public health emergencies like COVID-19, leveraging telemedicine to combat this disease is becoming so very crucial. Around the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has led to scarcity of resources on the healthcare front. And at a time when social distancing is among the most effective measures used in the fight against this global pandemic, telemedicine and telehealth is stepping up as a key technology for safe and effective communication. The World Health Organization has mentioned telemedicine amongst the essential services in strengthening the healthcare system in response to COVID-19. From a doctor's perspective, it will be easier, more convenient, and equally, if not more remunerative. To enlighten us on this very important subject, we are fortunate to have with us Professor K. Ganapathy here today. Professor Ganapathy was the first neurosurgeon in South Asia to be formally trained in stereotactic radiosurgery in 1995 and later in robotic surgery in 2008. He is also credited to be the first in South Asia to get a PhD in neuroimaging. Professor Ganapathy has been working relentlessly from 1999 for the growth and development of telemedicine. He is the director of the Apollo Telemedicine Networking Foundation and Apollo Telehealth Services, the oldest multi-speciality telemedicine network in South Asia. Professor Ganapathy is the past president of Telemedicine Society of India and also Neurological Society of India. He is the Professor Emeritus at Dr. MGR, Tamil Nadu Medical University, Chennai. He is on the editorial board of 4 international journals in telemedicine, 5 international and 3 national journals in neurosciences. During the last 45 years, Professor Ganapathy has presented 511 papers in national and 177 papers in international meetings. He has published 243 scientific papers and 16 chapters in books. With these few words, I would now like to request our speaker, Professor Ganapathy, to deliver his talk. And I also request all our participating attendees from all the 6 nations to post their queries, which will be taken once the session is over. Over to you, Professor Ganapathy.
Good evening, everybody. It's indeed a privilege to address so many doctors from so many neighboring countries. And I'm thankful to Dr. Rajat and Mankind for creating this opportunity. I first got introduced or hooked on to telemedicine as early as 1998. Developments in the last 4 months have shown that worldwide remote healthcare is the only way we will be able to make available good healthcare to everybody. Today, it does not matter whether you're in India, Myanmar, Uganda, or any country. Before I go into details, because some of you may not be very familiar with telemedicine, let me explain to you what I think telemedicine is. Telemedicine can be defined as the sum total of everything which goes together to ensure that we are able to provide remote healthcare with the patient and the doctor physically located in different places. For this, the single most important thing is connectivity. Today, sitting in my house, because I have a very good internet connection, I am able to talk to people in 6 countries. This could very well be 75 countries or even 100 countries. So connectivity is the single most important issue. We do require customized hardware, software. Modern medicine, it is not just history taking and clinical examination. As you know, patients need to be investigated, and therefore A teleconsultant, meaning a doctor who is physically away from where the patient is, needs to acquire the images, have the images stored. The images need to be retrieved, displayed, analyzed, digitally manipulated, and so on. This presupposes that all of us are trained in this. Customization is very essential. Telemedicine, which I practice in a quaternary care hospital in one of the biggest cities in India, may be totally different from what can be practiced by a fresh graduate in a remote part of Africa. Therefore, we need to customize the entire process. And again, we must be future ready. When I started telemedicine 20 years ago, there was no WhatsApp, even email was in its rudimentary form, and so on. One has to be compliant with the regulations in force in that particular country. But I foresee that in the next few years, the World Health Organization could be introducing an international code for telemedicine practice, because today telemedicine is breaking across country barriers. Of course, most important, it has to be revenue generating, because that is the only way it can be self-sustaining. There are two types of telemedicine. One is called synchronous, where I see the patient directly live through video conferencing. The second is a store and forward, or asynchronous, where the history of the patient is sent to me, the consultant, in the form of a text. The physical findings are sent to me either by a healthcare provider, or if it is a second opinion, by another doctor. Similarly, investigations like X-ray images, ultrasound images, CT scan images, and so on are all sent to me, and I do not directly examine the patient. I go through all the records and give an opinion. So these are broadly the two types of telemedicine. I'm extremely delighted that all the 6 countries which are now joined in this particular conference, telemedicine is there. It is not that telemedicine is a new word for all of you. Of course, the growth and development of telemedicine in each country is different from that in India. Every 6th human in the world lives in India. And obviously, just like India today is one of the leaders in providing healthcare anywhere in the world, similarly, we are also extremely advanced in delivery of telemedicine. The Apollo group of hospitals where I have been working for the last 34 years, I distinctly remember we did start a telemedicine unit as early as 2012 in Yangon, Myanmar, but for various reasons, it did not pick up the way we thought it would pick up. Again, Sri Lanka, it has been my privilege to visit Sri Lanka on 5 or 6 occasions. I've visited most of the hospitals in Colombo, in Kandy, and in other places. We've also had some discussions on telemedicine, but for some reason, maybe we were too far ahead of the time. We were not able to provide a service through collaboration. As a neurosurgeon, of course, I'm very familiar with the developments of neurosurgery in Sri Lanka. Again, Zambia, Kenya, I have not been to these places, but I do understand that telemedicine in these places are just starting. And I hope this talk will also entice you, make you understand that telemedicine is a reality. This is going to be the new normal. The slide in the middle, which I took from the internet, you can see hundreds of people waiting to see a doctor in a remote part of rural Zambia. This is similar in India as well, in rural India. But with the onset of the COVID-19, it's dangerous for hundreds of people to be so close together. Whether we like it or not, social distancing is going to be practiced for a long, long time to come. I have a very soft corner for Uganda. I had the privilege of meeting the First Lady. Of course, this was long ago, 2008. And the First Lady was herself a senator and a minister. She literally ordered me to come, and then through her, I had the opportunity to visit several hospitals in Uganda. We were in a very advanced stage of discussion to provide telemedicine services. We even identified an investor, and we were planning to build a $25 million hospital with telemedicine facilities. but then some political issues came in the local country. This was in 2008, and we were unable to take it further. Now, many of you would have heard TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, one of the world's biggest IT companies with a very major presence, not only in the United States, but in 136 countries. TCS has formally announced that post-COVID, after all, the acute phase of the endemic hopefully will not last for more than a few months. They have announced that in just a few years from now, 75% of their entire workforce of 4.5 lakh employees are going to permanently work from home. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the new normal, WFH, work from home. Throughout the world, for the last 30 to 45 days, all of us have been working from home. So, if engineers, technologists, administrators, and what have you do an WFH, why can't we doctors also work from home? I will try to convince you that it is in our own interest. It is in the interest of our patients. It is in our monetary interest, whatever parameter you adopt to work from home. No doubt I borrowed these slides, but I'm sure in another year or two in India, this is how medical practice is going to be. On the right-hand side, what you see, this is from Europe, is not a gentleman monitoring a space mission center, but an internal medicine, an MD in internal medicine. Look at the number of computers in front of him, and this is how he manages his outpatient. The same thing on all the other slides. All this is not as difficult as we think it is. It's definitely going to happen. Are we ready for a hospital which has no patients? I've been showing this slide for several years. Honestly, I never thought in my lifetime I would see it. But with the onset of COVID-19, this is already about to happen. The hospital of the future will be entirely restricted to tertiary level surgeries, cardiac transplant, renal transplant, acute head injuries, acute trauma, and so on. The place where medical treatment is going to be given, particularly in developing countries like Zambia, Uganda, Sri Lanka, etc., is going to change. From the hospital, it will go to the clinic, and after that, certainly in the next year or two, you will have a doctor in your pocket, a hospital in your pocket, and a laboratory in your pocket. All this is happening in pilot projects throughout India. I had written this article in one of India's leading newspapers about 12 years ago. I never thought that I would actually be using in my own department what is called POCD, point of care diagnostics, where with a drop of blood, and not even a paramedic, the patient himself or the patient's relative and friend, with a drop of blood with the POCD, I'm able to do the entire gamut of liver function tests, renal function tests, cardiac enzymes, troponin 1, troponin 2, etc. Today, it is possible to scientifically demonstrate and diagnose a myocardial infarction anywhere in the world if you have this POC device in your pocket. Now, diabetes, I'm not aware of the exact incidence in the various countries in which you are, but in India, it is as high as 16%. Urban India, every sixth person has got pre-diabetes or diabetes. And there are enough scientific studies all over the world which conclusively prove that telemedicine application ensures better compliance, better adherence. The HbA1c levels have significantly come down in the group where teleconsultation was given rather than the group where there was a face-to-face consultation. I'm quickly going to give you a few examples to convince you that I am not talking theory, I am talking practice. We run the world's largest 24/7 tele-emergency center in the Himalayas at a height of 14,500 feet. You can see this case report. Actually, the whole story is on a YouTube, and you can see how this man came to us on a Saturday evening. The external temperature was minus 25 degrees centigrade. The roads were all blocked with landstorm. With a lot of difficulty, he came. He had chest pain. The first ECG was normal, but I have a wonderful group of doctors. So the doctor said, I just don't like the look on his face. He looks ill. So don't send him away. Repeat the ECG after 45 minutes. We repeated the ECG and it showed an ST segment elevation and confirmed an inferior wall myocardial infarction. In other words, we had picked up an infarction as it was evolving. And my doctors from Madras, Chennai, 2,800 kilometers away, told the nurse there to start thrombolysis with streptokinase. Patient has done very well. Similarly, we have treated more than 15 cases of myocardial infarction as they were evolving. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the power of telemedicine. In the same emergency setup, 1,515 patients we have treated in the last 5 years, and we also have had cases of supraventricular tachycardia. You can see here on the bottom, on the top left-hand side, on this particular Saturday evening, the nurse was on leave, and we had a young girl who was actually an attender. She could not even spell the word defibrillator. But again, my doctors in the emergency ward, they said, don't worry, we have internet, we have a webcam, we will teach you what to do, how to do, when to do, where to do, and so forth. And they took a mannequin, and with the mannequin, my doctor demonstrated how to apply the pads and what is the amperage, joules, etc. to give, how to give a jolt, and telementoring was done. And this was done for the first time in her life by this young girl who had never even seen a defibrillator before. The pulse rate came down, patient is absolutely normal. Over the last several years, we have done many cases of cardioversion like this. Now, here are a few examples of the power of telemedicine. Dermatology is the easiest and the simplest, a 99% accuracy. It's almost impossible to make a mistake. And on the lower left-hand side, you can see a patient from Bangladesh. And even though I'm a neurosurgeon, I'm not very familiar on how to manage this patient who also had neurological problems. So what did I do? I got a team of experts, and this man in Dhaka was able to consult several experts in one single sitting. Today, I think it is a crime. It doesn't matter which country the child is, but look at the top left, right-hand side. A young baby, hardly 15, 18 months old, had an open heart surgery. And this child used to come 2,000 kilometers across the length and breadth of India to see the pediatric cardiac surgeon, just so that the cardiac surgeon can see the scar and auscultate the individual. Today, all this can be done remotely. On the lower side, as you will see here on the lower, yeah, okay. I'm just switching on a video. I'm not sure whether you will be able to hear the sound, whether the technology is allowing the sound, but this was an echocardiogram. And look at the middle slide at the bottom, 2001, October 2001, when the rest of the world had no idea about tele-echocardiography, we had already started doing it. I had a wonderful pediatric cardiologist who supervised 138 pediatric tele-echocardiograms done in a village by a trained technician, and we were able to transmit dynamically in real time that echocardiogram. Today, of course, we do this as a routine. A few more examples of dermatology consultation. You can see the diagnosis can be varying from eczema to melasma and so on. A first glance at this slide, you may think it is a typographical mistake. It is not. This is one of the major public-private partnership projects which we do with one of the states in southern India. And as you can see, 115 vision centers in rural Andhra Pradesh, which is a state adjoining the state where I live in, Chennai. It's called Tamil Nadu. And you can see here, 351,000 fundus examinations have been done in 115 places by 30 ophthalmologists working about 300 to 400 kilometers away in Chennai. These papers have been presented at World Conference. Papers have been published. We have been doing this for the last 2 years. And as you can see, in spite of the lockdown, these centers are still working, and I've been able to get the dashboard as on 24th. I'm just lazy. Otherwise, I could have updated this slide even right now. So this is how, through satellite connection, we are able to upload photographs. You can see a villager in front of a fundus camera. And some of these people are not even trained optometrists. They are people who have been trained but not qualified optometrists. On the right-hand side, you see ophthalmologists looking at the fundus, and a color scan, a computer-generated report, a printout is delivered to the patient within 8 to 9 minutes of the patient's fundus being examined. We do this day in and day out, 6 days a week. Again, to show that telemedicine today has become an integral part of the healthcare delivery system, at least so far as the Apollo group of hospitals are concerned. You can see how in March 2020, over a period of 2.5 years, we have touched the 1 million mark. Out of these 1 million patients whom we have seen, specialist teleconsultations is a staggering 9.87 lakh patient. And this was, of course, in March. Today, the number probably would have completed to 1 million. That was 10 million, sorry, not 1 million. Total consultations, 10 million. The specialist teleconsultations have reached 1 million. Laboratory referrals, again, 1.7 million laboratory investigations have been done in 135 laboratories. All this are telementored from Hyderabad. Quality control of all these laboratories are done remotely from Hyderabad, one of the big cities in India. This is how we progressed in Himachal Pradesh, which is in the Himalayas bordering China. As I told you, the height varies from 13,000 to 18,000 feet. And again, as of April, about a month ago, we had done 17,900 teleconsultations, of which 1,515 today are emergency consultations. Similarly, we deliver telemedicine to several places, including several Government of India big factories in the border of Assam, just 20 kilometers away from China. And my doctors here, I have 3 to 4 obstetrician gynecologists from Madras. They have been able to remotely diagnose anemia in pregnancy. They have been able to manage pre-existing diabetes, gestational diabetes, counseling for HIV patients who are pregnant, and so on. I understand that many complications like postpartum hemorrhage, stillbirth, uterine inertia, etc., which normally would be present, have been avoided because of the teleconsultation. I'm now going to the second part of my talk, which I think is even more important everywhere, namely, what is the particular relevance of telemedicine in today's scenario? Contrary to general belief, pandemics do occur very, very rarely. The very first pandemic, which we know of in detail, in fact, the word quarantine came from quaranta, which in Latin means 40 days, was in 1348 when Venice became the first city to enforce an official quarantine. In 1918, the Spanish influenza caused the death of more than 10 million people at that time. Now, why is telemedicine particularly important today in every country in the world? This is because over the last 4 months, we have, as of this morning, reached 3.4 million people have been infected with the coronavirus. And all over the world, including India, there are thousands and thousands of people. In India, it's about 6% of the total number of people who have been tested as corona positive. It's about 38,000 people or so in India. 6% or more are healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, paramedics, ambulance drivers, and so on. Now, it is very, very important that we belonging to the healthcare community take extra precautions. You know what will happen if the healthcare providers themselves are quarantined. Now, this was how the wards were when I was a medical student 50 years ago. Today, most hospitals in India, in fact, all hospitals in urban India are never like this, but we are afraid that unless we take proper preventive measures, this could how it could be. Now, the interesting thing here is even if doctors are quarantined, they cannot physically see a patient. Please remember that they are mentally and physically in top form, and therefore they can continue to provide consultations and remote screening of 100 to 150 people. Worldwide, telemedicine has been accepted as in the primary healthcare strategy. Trump, when he first released $4.8 billion for the corona pandemic, set apart $500 million exclusively for the use of telemedicine. World Health Organization, the Center for Disease Control, Atlanta, Georgia, United States, most other governments, China, Australia, Hong Kong, and so on, have all advocated telemedicine. And today, telemedicine is no longer a dirty word, which is what it was 20 years ago when I first started telemedicine. Today, throughout the world, every single individual knows that remote healthcare is what is required all over. Again, I just did not have time to do a detailed study. I'm not familiar with what is happening in your 6 countries, but in India, the growth has been exponential. It is absolutely amazing. To my knowledge itself, I get WhatsApp messages of at least 8 to 10 forwards like the one I'm showing you on the screen now. Hospitals all over India, doctors all over India, clinics all over India have all jumped onto the bandwagon. They're all offered to provide free video consultation, not only for coronavirus screening, but also for non-coronavirus conditions. As there is a lockdown, it may be difficult for these people to physically come to a hospital. So the growth of telemedicine has been exponential. Every single state in India has now today emphasized again and again the necessity for teleconsultation. Now, here is an example. Let's look at how we can do telescreening for COVID-19 particularly. We have all know that the general presenting symptoms of COVID-19 is fever, sore throat, cough, difficulty in breathing, etc. As you can see in this illustrated visual today, everything can be done remotely. Bluetooth enabled thermometers, infrared thermometers can transmit literally thousands of temperature readings to designated teleconsultants anywhere. The patient himself or the patient's relative can be taught to focus a scope, as you can see here, into the ear, into the nose, into the throat, and you can see how I can look inside the interior of the throat. China recently announced that robots are being used to take swabs from the throat without human intervention. Several government hospitals in India have already started deploying robots for many of these clinical cases as well. Again, stethoscopes, in my lifetime, I'm sure I'm going to see doctors no longer wearing a stethoscope with 2 earpieces inside their ear and directly in front of the patient with a chest piece on the patient's chest. Bluetooth enabled stethoscopes like the one you see on the left hand side. This is already available, but it's not yet become routine practice. The COVID-19 is ensuring that this becomes routine very soon. Pulse oximeter, oxygenation is critical in COVID-19. Today, it's very simple to have a wired or wireless oximeter, and I will know exactly the oxygen saturation of hundreds of patients anywhere, wherever the patient is. Similarly, we have FDA approved, European Commission approved, 12-lead ECGs, multi-frequency transducers, you name it. Even echocardiograms today have become mobile and almost a pocket echocardiogram. I do know that this is probably not really relevant for people in other countries, but I think it's important you know what has happened in a big country like India. March 24, 2000 was to me a red letter day because it is on this day that the world's first VSAT-enabled village hospital was commissioned by Bill Clinton, the then President of the United States, when he visited India. Exactly 20 years and 24 hours later, the Medical Council of India announced, notified an amendment to the Indian Medical Council Act, whereby consultation through telemedicine was made legal. I'm just going to very quickly give you a few more examples to show how this fits in with what is today legal. Now, here is a patient who a post-head injury sequelae. Now, I belong to the old generation of doctors. I refuse to give an opinion based on a CT scan or an X-ray or an MRI or any investigation. I want to see the patient. Now, this is a small town in the state where I live in, 300 kilometers away. You can see how with an entry-level phone, this was several years ago, not even a smartphone, the relatives are able to show me through an ordinary mobile phone, they're able to give me whatever information I want, and I am able to prescribe medication for this patient. Now, it is very important that we do not get carried away by use of technology. Never ever forget that technology is only a means to achieve an end and not an end by itself. Now, this young boy was referred to me from Dubai, and as in 99% of seizures, when I examined him virtually from Madras, there was no neurological deficit. The CT scan done in Dubai was normal. The EEG done in Dubai was normal. Though I was fairly sure that he had convulsions, I was a little reluctant to give an e-prescription. So I told the family, look, don't worry, nothing is going to happen if he gets another fit. Have a mobile phone with you, and the next time the boy gets an attack, just capture it on video and send the video to me. You can see here the video. Any good medical student should be able to diagnose a classical example of a temporal lobe seizure. There is no tonic-clonic convulsions. It is not a grand mal type of seizure, but you can see how for 40 seconds there's an absence attack, a sensory attack, and now in the post-ictal stage he has come back. So this is what I mean by teleconsultation. You must have enough clinical acumen. It is finally clinical, and clinical. Use technology, but only for a clinical examination. I'm now demonstrating to you what should be done, at least in India, but I'm assuming that almost all of this will apply. It doesn't matter which country you're working in, it will be more or less the same. Consequent to the notification of the present guidelines, again, this was a lady who I had treated for a tumor in the brain, in the base of the skull. She now called me on the phone, lockout period, in another city, about on the 10th of April, correct, on the 11th of April, and then I did a teleconsultation. Now you can see here how I've captured this on video. I'm not sure whether you're able to hear the audio, but you can see I'm examining the patient for trigeminal anesthesia. I want to know whether there is a sensory blunting on the right side of the face. This is all the information that I want, which I'm able to get, and I've captured it on video. Now you see here on the top left-hand side is my photograph, my name, my qualifications, my registration number with the State Medical Council. Again, on the top right-hand side, I've written permission obtained from so-and-so. I've anonymized her. I'm not at any stage revealing her name or identity. And the prescription, I'm writing a prescription, ordinary prescription in my letterhead, as I normally do. My registration number is below my signature. The Medical Council of India insists for teleconsultation, for e-prescriptions, for teleprescriptions, also for a face-to-face encounter, but particularly for a telemedicine prescription, that the diagnosis must be written. I have written the diagnosis, and I've also written the findings. I've also said fundus not examined. I have prescribed a drug. I have not mentioned the trade name. I have mentioned the generic name, carbamazepine, 100 milligrams, 1 at 8 a.m. one at 8 p.m. for 10 days, telephonic review after 10 days to call the number which I have given. Another example of a consultation I gave just about a week ago, lockdown period in a remote part of North India, a 75-year-old person in a small town, diabetic, hypertensive, myocardial infarction on anticoagulants, warfarin, blood thinners, and so on. He developed an iatrogenic or a drug-induced subdural, and because of the coronavirus situation, a regular craniotomy could not be done. The neurosurgeon did 2 burr holes, evacuated as much of the liquid clot as possible. The patient came back home. Taking everything into consideration, it was decided, and I gave my opinion, that he continued to be at home rather than bother about the residual clot inside the brain after surgery. And you can see here, all the CT scans are there. On the lower left-hand side is a relevant page from the case record. So this is the power of telemedicine. There is no way, particularly in the lockdown period, this very elderly person who stays 200 kilometers away from the nearest hospital where a neurosurgeon is available could have contacted a very senior neurosurgeon and obtained a consultation. So this is the power of telemedicine. I'm not going to go into the details of prescription because this may differ from country to country, excepting to mention that the government has stepped out this in great detail and we need to follow this. The telemedicine practice guidelines, you need to understand, was notified as a semi-emergency because of the pandemic. And therefore, there are a lot of exclusions. The present guidelines do not mention specifications for hardware or software. They do not talk about data management systems, etc. This will probably be dealt with in the first amendment to this. So in conclusion, for the first part of my talk, I would like to emphasize again and again that this guideline is excellent. It describes in great detail how we can provide teleconsultation through email, through a telephone call, through a message, through fax, WhatsApp, devices connected over LAN, WAN, other mobile and computer applications such as Skype, Google Hangouts, chatbot, etc., etc. Of course, this will be notified because of the pandemic, but every one of us are sure that even after the pandemic is denotified, telemedicine will continue to be there. I think this is very, very important. I am not familiar with whether similar notifications have been done in your respective countries, but if it is not, I would strongly urge every one of you to do whatever you can to ensure that this is done. It was during the Second World War that Winston Churchill said, "Never, ever let a good crisis go to waste." The whole world has woken up, and I'm sure that all of us are going to beat the coronavirus. Remote healthcare is one very important way in which we can beat it. I just downloaded this slide a few hours ago, and the number was a staggering 3.5 million people proved coronavirus. Now, the coronavirus has in the last few months transformed life on this normally peaceful planet. This exponential disruption is not because of the virus biology per se, but it's secondary to the massive global measures which have been adopted to contain the rapid spread. Global economy is taking a toss, and there are no signs that we are anywhere near the signs of recovery. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes on telling you why telehealth is the single most important way in managing or containing the spread of COVID-19. In India, we have 700,000 villages, of whom 250,000 have people called ASHA, or a basic health worker. This basic health worker is digitally literate, and for the last 4 to 5 years has been empowered with a tablet. Today, the government of India is doing fantastic work, and this tablet, a self-evaluation screening form, is available in this tablet, and this basic health worker who's actually a school dropout, has studied up to 8th grade or 9th grade, is able to fill the form remotely, getting the data from a mobile phone. When the data is filled up, thousands and thousands of data points from each ASHA is uploaded onto the cloud immediately, and using very sophisticated big data analytics, the government of India at Delhi is able to calculate in real time the risk run by any particular person and is able to initiate corrective measures. Again, laboratory tests can be fixed electronically. You do not need a person to go to a hospital to get a test done. Screening is being done, but then we need to magnify it considerably. It has still not been accepted by every person. And I think you and I, as medical doctors, we play a very important part. Please, please, it doesn't matter which country you are in, please ensure that as far as possible, tele-screening will be done, tele-appointments will be fixed, and the patient will come to the nearest laboratory at a specific time. Patient should not come back to get the results. The results of the lab test can be communicated electronically. Virtual visits is the most effective way to decide on who needs to be tested for COVID-19. Again, health systems have developed automatic logic flows, which today it is possible for algorithms, self-assessment tools with a 95% accuracy to decide on whether you run a low risk, a moderate risk, or a high risk. A single remote clinician can cover multiple sites spread across different localities. Worried individuals can be monitored virtually. Respiratory clinics, escalating it, mobile respiratory clinics can be manned by trained paramedical staff. These mobile hospital on wheels can be set up in different areas, and paramedics there can enable a consultation, and doctors can consult. A doctor can, if necessary, escalate this to an ICU specialist or a pulmonologist. I have put the photograph on the left deliberately to remind myself that telemedicine is not new at all. This was what we used to do in 2000 and 2000, and from 2000, 2001. Unfortunately, people just did not embrace it. And I hope that the presence of an RNA strand will totally change the importance given to telehealth. Now, rapidly expanding use of telehealth is indeed a challenge. It is very easy for me to give lectures for hours advocating and evangelizing what is telemedicine. You do require necessary technology infrastructure. You have to recruit virtual providers. You need to provide training on best practices. Again, as I am telling you again and again, unless there is revenue generation, telemedicine will never ever continue. Making money is not a bad word. Somebody has to pay for it. It may be the government, it may be insurance companies, it may be the employer, or it may be the patient directly. The doctor, the healthcare provider may be a salaried individual or maybe on a fee for service, but free consultations at the best can only be there for a couple of weeks, maximum couple of months. So we need to ensure that we develop a method where payment is made. This is very, very important. I've already mentioned about fever, cough, shortness, and breath. I don't need to have a CT scan of the lungs. I don't need sophisticated telespirometry and so on. All I need is a patient to count from 1 to 30. And if he or she finds difficulty, has dyspnea in counting after 10 or 12, I know that he or she has a problem with her pulmonary functional capacity, and a reserve of expiratory volume is less, and such a patient needs to be evaluated. Triage chart like this are being modified on a day-to-day basis. Weightage given to fatigue and weakness, to sore throat, to cough, etc. become different in different parts of the country, in different countries, and so on. Today, when I graduated, there were 100 medical colleges in India. Today, we have 525 medical colleges in India. Before the COVID-19 epidemic, India was actually announcing a new medical college every 3 weeks. If India can do this, I see no reason why every single country in the world cannot have a telemedicine unit. At least 10% of all hospitals in your country should have a full-fledged telemedicine unit. The institution where I work today provides almost 6,000 teleconsultations every day. This was a AC, I call it BC and AC era, before coronavirus. After coronavirus, we have increased by almost 50 to 75%. We are now reaching almost 10,000 consultations per day. This is our medical response center in Hyderabad, where almost 140 people sit attending to telephone calls every day. From a neurosurgeon who started telemedicine as a hobby in 1998, in the last 22 years, the remote healthcare division of the Apollo Hospitals Group today has almost 3,000 employees. Of course, the majority of them are employed in projects. We have a permanent staff of almost 375 employees, and today we are reaching almost 10,000 consults a day in the COVID era. We have already covered 10 million consultations so far. This may not be relevant for the audience of this particular webinar, but this is again an appeal to you, and may I appeal to Mankind Pharmaceuticals also. I personally, and on behalf of the Telemedicine Society of India, of which I'm a past president, we would be very happy to arrange an orientation sensitization program for one or more of these countries with the help of representatives from the local people. The Medical Council of India has asked the Telemedicine Society of India, of course, they have asked us to orient 500,000 doctors. We have just started on a pilot project. We have covered about 2,500 doctors. Over the next few months, we hope to orient a large number, even if you don't reach the number which we have been asked to. So this is again an appeal. We would be very happy. This can either be a 2-hour, 3-hour orientation course, or even a full-fledged 50 hours, 75 hours, 100 hours online training program, which will be customized and tailor-made to suit your particular country. Thank you, Dr. Rajat. Thank you, Mankind, for giving me this opportunity. If there are any questions, I will be happy to take them. So once again, and instead of shaking hands, this is the new normal. Namaste, good evening, goodbye.
Thank you, Professor Ganapathy. I think it was our privilege to hear from the who's who in the field of telemedicine. And we have a lot of questions received. So we will start with a question from Dr. Kasomba Ivan from Uganda. And the question is very pertinent in the context of the country. Uganda has a poor network, and the patients too cannot afford expensive drugs, and they're poor. So how can telemedicine be of aid in Uganda to the doctors?
I have been to Uganda, as I said, but that was long ago. I have visited the hospital. That was in 2008. Assuming that not too many changes have taken place from 2008, I do agree it's a tremendous challenge. We need to customize, tailor make. So you don't require 5 MB, 10 MB, 3G, 4G and all that. And India was also like that in 2008. So even if you can have a bandwidth of 256 kbps or 512 kbps, that should suffice. And even at that time, when I visited Kampala, I noticed that a lot of people had mobile phones. So I think you can help the people in rural Uganda by developing a system. We would be happy to help you, where there is a doctor on call 8 to 10 hours a day. And with an ordinary webcam, with an ordinary mobile phone, you will at least be able to do a tele-triage. You can decide which patient needs immediately to come to Kampala or the other big cities in Uganda. And other than that, it is difficult. I do agree. I fully sympathize with you, having been there. I know how difficult it is, but my humble appeal is, at this stage, the world is totally changed. I tried my best in 2008, but I just couldn't succeed. The World Health Organization, Gates Foundation, Bill Clinton Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation. There are so many organizations who have the money. Sir, please get 3 or 4 interested people. We will be very happy to help you. Please apply for funding, and I'll assure you that we will set up an excellent telemedicine setup. All that we require is funding. You need to help us get some funding, and within 1 year, I can guarantee you that we will do in Uganda what we are now doing in India.
Right. Let us start with a question on what is happening worldwide on the front of telemedicine. We have spoken about India, we have spoken about the 6 nations. So, what else is happening on the front of telemedicine across the world?
Okay, that's a very good question. I'll start off with the countries which have been affected. United States, as you know, is a country with extreme regulations. The 43 states of the United States, you required state licensure. A doctor in California was not allowed to give consultations to a patient outside California. All these rules have been totally taken away. You need not be HIPAA compliant. I'm sure many of you are aware that they are actually paranoid about HIPAA compliance. That again has been removed. Skype was not allowed. Google Hangouts was not allowed. WhatsApp was not allowed. Every one of them are now being allowed as a tele emergency for the period of the epidemic. And insurance companies, most insurance companies already had started reimbursing, but it was an extremely complicated method of coding, etc. All that have been removed, and today a telephone consultation has been divided into less than 10 minutes, 11 to 20 minutes, 21 to 30 minutes, and doctors are reimbursed for that. Kaiser Permanente, the world's largest consortium of hospitals, 75% of their, I don't remember the exact figures, I think it's almost 300,000 per day or something like that, are virtual consultations and not physical visits.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Ganapathy. Why has telemedicine become so important suddenly? It was there since the last 20 years, as you said, but in the current context, what has made it so very important?
I had already mentioned that social distancing is the norm. And all of us know that unless 80% of the 7.1 billion people on this planet are infected, what is called herd immunity, unless we get herd immunity, this is going to continue. Even if a vaccine is developed, it's impossible to give that vaccine to millions and millions and millions of people. Therefore, it is most unfortunate, but social distancing is going to be the new norm, and crowding has to be avoided. Aeroplanes are going to be refitted, train travel, bus travel, car travel, everything is going to change. But people will continue to have acute appendicitis, people will continue to have myocardial infarction, convulsions, etc. Therefore, a country, organization, a doctor who is not familiar with remote healthcare will soon be out of the system completely.
I'll take a question from Dr. Okanet Anthony from Uganda, and he's a general practitioner there. Doctor wants to know, are there any apps for diagnostics that you can recommend our doctors to utilize in telemedicine? The first question. The follow-up question is that, do you have any plans? He's probably speaking on behalf of Government of India, since you were a part of that, that you intend to start the project of telemedicine, as you said, in Uganda.
The answer to your first question, I do not directly deal with apps. We would certainly like to help you. Please send a mail. You can send it to Mr. Rajat, and who in turn will forward it to me. And I will ensure that one of my staff gets back to you. I like, at my level, I like to be agnostic. I am not here to recommend a application or that application or this application. I should be above that, but my staff will certainly give you a list of applications, and you can choose whatever you think is appropriate, relevant to you. With regard to the second question, I honestly am not at all competent, or not, though I've been associated, I continue to be on some committees. I cannot talk on behalf of the Government of India. but I can talk as the head of the telehealth division of the Apollo group of hospitals, which is one of the largest, third largest in the world chain of hospitals, at a personal level, and whatever permission or approvals are required, I will get it from the chairman of the hospital. We would certainly be very happy to help you set up a telemedicine unit, but you need to get us funds. We are not looking at this as a commercial enterprise at all, but then whatever expenses are incurred has to be reimbursed. So I also told you some of the sources for funding. So if you can get us some funding, we would be very happy to very quickly set up a telemedicine unit and train as many doctors as you want.
Right. We have a question from Dr. Kemigisa Mary, and we have received similar questions from other doctors. What do we require to set up a telemedicine unit? What is the basic requirement?
Very good. Excellent question. I'll just confine myself to basic requirement. Connectivity, connectivity, connectivity. That is the single most important thing. At least 512 kbps, preferably 1 MB download, upload as you call it. Single most important thing is connectivity. The second thing is not fancy video conferencing cameras, fancy hardware, software, many of the photographs I showed you, all that, but is a passionate desire. By now, you would have understood that I'm absolutely passionate about telemedicine. So what is required is a group of mad doctors. Unless you are slightly mad, you cannot do this. You need a group of doctors who will not take no for an answer. The more the difficulties, the more their enthusiasm, the more their decision to overcome them. Now, number two. Number three, of course, a small video conferencing camera, etc. These all have to be customized, tailor-made. Again, if the specific things are given or sent to me, we will try to help you and tell you what exactly is required. I mean, in a webinar like this, in a couple of minutes, I can't give you a list of do's and don'ts.
We have a question from Dr. Rambuka, and the similar question is from their Dr. Bashabe Lagan, that in remote areas where the people do not have access to internet, or they do not have the computer or IT skills, how can we utilize telemedicine as a doctor in such setups?
Sorry, it's not possible. Without connectivity, nothing is possible. So there's no, the word tele implies from a distance. So without connectivity, nothing can be done. Connectivity need not be through the internet. Connectivity can be through VSAT. Connectivity can be through Wi-Fi. Connectivity can be through WiMAX. Connectivity can be through several other procedures. Need not be through the internet, but you must have connectivity. Without connectivity, there's no telemedicine.
Now, coming to, since we're talking about 6 countries today, what about cross-country teleconsults? Is that allowed? Is it being done?
Very good question. I was actively involved for almost 10 years, till about 2 years ago. The government of India started the Pan-African Network, where 42 countries in Africa were connected to my department. And I was involved, I was a member of the steering committee for the Ministry of External Affairs. And through this, I had visited many countries in Africa several times. Unfortunately, for various reasons, about 2 years ago, the government of India closed down that particular project. So that is, what is your question again? Sorry.
The question was that in remote areas, how can we utilize the services of telemedicine where patients don't have access to internet facility? And
no, that I already answered. You asked me another question after that.
Oh, I forgot. I'll take over the next question.
Okay.
The next question is regarding, is it possible to start an online course to be conducted for doctors in other countries? Because we are thinking on the same lines for India. So is it possible that that is done for other countries?
It is possible to do it yesterday, not even today. Of course, it is 100% possible. But again, funding. There is a cost to everything. So no course like this can be conducted free of cost. We need to get some funds from somewhere to meet the expenses. It is definitely possible. And we can also ensure that a certificate is given by appropriate authorities which are recognized internationally.
We have 2 common questions, one from Dr. Nalin Pereira from Sri Lanka and the other from Dr. Richard, that what is the means of taking payments from the patients while utilizing telemedicine? How can we take the patient fee?
Yeah, good question. Again, I'm sorry that I don't know the intricacies of digital payment in your respective countries. But in India, at least, I'm sure the same thing will apply in most of the countries. In India, of course, we have a bank. Today, the government has been pushing for digital transfer. I have not gone to a bank for more than 8 or 9 years. Everything is done by net banking or through a credit card, debit card, etc. So similarly, our patients, you can charge whatever fees you want, and it's entirely up to you. There are no standard guidelines, rules, regulations. There are so many ways of doing this. So you can transfer it electronically before, after, how you transfer it, how you give a receipt, all this is entirely up to you. Dr. Rajat, I remembered the question which you asked me. You were asking me about multinational consultations. So we
Right.
were,
Cross country teleconsults.
yeah,
Right.
I have personally given consultations to many patients when I was an active neurosurgical practice, particularly to countries in Africa. Many of these were done as part of the Pan African Network project. That was a Government of India project. So there, it was a second opinion. A local neurosurgeon there would consult me, or a cardiologist, and I would get a cardiologist, etc. So that is done. We also have given consultations for, somebody known to you, something like that, all over the world. On March 25th, 2020, just 6 weeks ago, in the notifications, the government has mentioned very clearly that these practice guidelines are applicable to doctors and patients in geographically in India. They have not said that it is illegal to give a consultation to a patient outside India. They have not said that at all. But neither have they said it is legal to do this. We intend to make a representation to the government. I'm sure in a few months that will be sorted out. So at the moment, consultations are being done. I don't know whether it is, again, it depends on the other country. Now, Abu Dhabi, for example, Abu Dhabi is very strict. Abu Dhabi does not allow a citizen of Abu Dhabi to get a teleconsultation from any doctor outside Abu Dhabi unless that doctor is formally registered with the Abu Dhabi Health Authority. So we have given consultations to Sri Lanka and a few other countries. It's a gray area. Personally speaking, I don't think it's illegal, but nobody has said it's legal either.
Right. Let us take a question from Dr. Muto Iwan from Uganda. I think it would be personalized, but still he wants to know what should a teleconsult cost in dollars to a patient?
That again is very variable, sir. It depends on the specialist or super specialist or super subspecialist. We have separate rates for, I can only tell you what we are doing. We have separate rates for SAARC countries, the Middle East, and consultations from Europe, US, etc. Now, if I want a consultation, a second opinion from, I just want to give you the right perspective. If I want a consultation from Johns Hopkins, Johns Hopkins charges an incredible $1,000 for a single consultation. That is what the international standard is. We charge for neighboring countries, we charge $50. For African countries, for SAARC countries, we charge $50 plus GST tax or something. I think including tax, it will come to $60 for SAARC countries. For other countries, it is $100.
Right. Dr. Iramba Murthy wants to know that when should we start? Should we take the fee before starting a teleconsult or post teleconsult? He wants to know the perspective in India. What is being followed in India?
That again depends entirely on the particular individual, sir. Now, I am an old-fashioned doctor. I'm not a businessman. So a person like me, I feel uncomfortable taking a fees before giving a consultation. Yes, you are right. 5% or 10% of the patients don't pay me after I give the consultation. Well, I write it off. So it's entirely up to you. Entirely up to you what you.
Dr. Ganapathy, we have a question from Dr. BMK Fernando from Sri Lanka. He wants to know, you have been practicing telemedicine for the past 20 plus years. What is the success rate of telemedicine when compared to normal physical method of consultancy?
Right. A very good question. It'll take me 30 minutes to answer your question. It depends on your parameters, criteria to measure success. If by success you are saying the number of wrong diagnosis, I'm assuming that's what you're asking, the number of times a wrong diagnosis has been made. Now, I I didn't have time to mention in my lecture. I assume that I think every person, every medical doctor who wants to be a teleconsultant should have the maturity to understand the in the context. See, teleconsultation depends entirely on the context in which you are giving the consultation. So, in other words, my success has been 99% because in the earlier years, when the quality of internet was not good, bandwidth was very low, audio, video was not good, in 5 to 10% of cases, I have told all my doctors not to proceed with a teleconsultation unless they are 100% satisfied that they have got all the information they want. For example, if a doctor is uncomfortable in making a diagnosis of possible prostatic enlargement without doing a rectal examination, we will stop the teleconsultation and tell the patient, you must go and see a doctor for a rectal examination. If this criteria, very hard, stringent criteria you use, the success rate is 99%. However, if you continue with your teleconsultation and do not proceed without taking, now for example, I have not been able to see the fundus as a neurosurgeon. In many cases, I don't have an teleophthalmoscopy at that time. So I have said, sorry, I cannot give an opinion. You have to go to a doctor. The fundus must be examined. So if you use such criteria, the success rate is 99%.
We have questions from Dr. Dhammika Vijayatunga from Sri Lanka and Dr. Okung from Africa. They want to know the perspective on the medical legal front, that what are the issues legally which Indian doctors face when doing teleconsult in India?
Very good question, sir. Now, the answer will, of course, be confined to Indian doctors practicing in India. I'm not conversant with the rules and regulations, if any. Maybe there are no rules and regulations at the moment in these 6 countries. Now, again, until March 25th, 2020, there was uncertainty because there were no definite rules. And people like me, enthusiasts like me, we went ahead, but a large percentage of Indian doctors who were concerned did not embrace telemedicine. Coronavirus has totally changed everything. Today, the government has notified it is legal to give teleconsultation from any part of India to a patient anywhere in India, subject to you are following the telemedicine practice guidelines, 53-page document, which is available on the internet. You need to follow the rules. It's absolutely legal.
We have a very pertinent question from Dr. Udita Ranavida from Sri Lanka, that is it ethical to do a teleconsult for a disorder pertaining to the genital area, any genital diseases?
Excellent question, sir. Excellent question. Again, it depends on the context. Now, let me give you an example. I have facilitated 77 patients in the Himalayas of tele-cervical cancer screening. Cervical cancer for women in the height of 15,000 feet in the Himalayas. We have done that. We have picked up cancer which should never ever have been picked up. Now, when this was done, even though I head the entire telemedicine division, I am not there. No male member is there. We ensure the highest level of privacy, security, encryption, etc., etc. We get an informed consent. We explain to the women at the other end. We explain to the nurse at the other end. Only women are allowed there, and even the photographs, etc., are only if for an academic purpose. Some of the photographs I do not have access. Only the obstetrician gynecologist who was presiding over this particular project knows what is happening. So it depends. It entirely depends on the amount of measures you put in, the confidence you are able to build up in the woman at the other end. Everything should be transparent. We made everything transparent. And when we had it on a fixed day of the week at a fixed time, and nobody was allowed inside the telemedicine room at that time. So I decided to go ahead with this because I thought the benefits are much more than the possible repercussions. So this is an individual decision you need to take. Your patient needs to consent, but you're absolutely right. You need to be sensitive. You need to be aware of this. And I'm very happy that you raised this point.
We have a very, very important question from Dr. Oboy Eros Joel from Uganda. The question is that in relation to increasing incidences of cyber crime, how can we shield the confidentiality of the patient's details, their medical records? Question number one. The follow-up question is pertaining to his discipline, that is dermatology, that where diagnosis of a disease is so very influenced by the direct physical examination of the patients. So how should a doctor do that in teleconsult?
I'm a little surprised at the second part of the answer. Dermatology, in our opinion, in the last 20 years is the simplest, easiest, 99.9% accuracy. Our dermatologists have done more than 10,000 consultations so far. Of course, a very good history is absolutely essential. We all know that drug induced, that, this, etc. History taking is very, very important. But I'm surprised because the equivalent of a physical examination can be done through a good photography, a good image. I'm not a dermatologist, but this is the impression which I have got. That is one. With reference to the first part of your question, again, if a hacker wants to hack into the White House, he can do it. Nothing is 5,000% secure. Now, what you need, your conscience needs to be clear. In the very, very unlikely event of a case coming to court, the court needs to be convinced that you have taken all normal preventive measures, but you need not be paranoid about it. Let us be very practical. This is not like a credit card transaction where my CVV and my OTP is critical. See, if I can use an unparliamentary word, who the hell is interested in whether I've got scabies or whether I've got a mosquito bite in my skin condition? So I think we should not get paranoid about it. Again, one interesting observation which the government of India has made is in the recently notified rules, the government has unambiguously stated that security, backup copies, antivirus attacks, and all the cyber security is entirely the primary responsibility of the platform provider and not that of the teleconsultant. So as a dermatologist, you are not liable. The liability is entirely the app if you're using an app or the platform provider if you're using a platform.
There is a question from Dr. Daya Veeraman. And I think as we have seen, we have done webinars in India with you, sir, and the doctors are very much skeptical about the medical negligence part. What happens if they miss something on the diagnosis or treatment part? So he wants to know the same about this. What is the medical negligence perspective of teleconsult?
I may be biased again, and I will give you my personal experience and what I have been answering to this question asked so many times. I was in active neurosurgical practice for 45 years. I was working in a corporate hospital, a very large corporate hospital, and in a public hospital concurrently at the same time. I have not had a single issue in the last 45 years. I do not for a moment claim that I was a perfect role model, a perfect textbook. No, certainly I would have made mistakes. Some of them perhaps could even have resulted in 2020 to draw an attention to, and somebody could have gone to a consumer protection forum. But please understand, worldwide, and there is enough published literature on this, 98%, 99% of cases which go to court are not because of adverse results, not because the patient died unexpectedly, not because of a neurological deficit which he should not have developed, etc., etc., purely because the doctor has antagonized the patient, has made the patient angry, has irritated the patient because of very poor communication. Tender, loving care to a patient, empathizing with the patient, sympathizing with the patient, make the patient fall in love with you, make the patient understand what your problems are. And believe me, even if the result goes bad, he will not go to court. Suo moto, that is the organization, the authorities by themselves taking notice of an error of judgment is very, very rare. Of course, if you have done a deliberate mistake, error of judgment occurs all over the world, anytime, everywhere. No court will penalize you for a genuine error of judgment. So I think we need not get paranoid about it. Having said that, take all routine precautions, get a disclaimer also, get a consent form and inform the consent form, discuss with the family what are all the things which can go wrong. But most important thing is documentation, documentation, and documentation. So long as you document, in the case of teleconsultations electronically, you need to document. You saw that slide which I showed. I've written there, permission obtained to produce this photograph in a webinar. I've got the permission, I've documented, I've written down everything. So long as you document, you can explain everything. Don't bother about the results. Whatever judgment, at the end of the day, it's all about professional judgment, clinical competence, and the context under which an error occurred. So long as you did something in good faith, in the interest of the patient, you did not have anything mala fide, you did not do something just to make more money, no court anywhere in the world can even pass strictures against you.
I think we've already spoken about the availability, lack of technology in parts of Uganda, the attitude of doctors of patients. Dr. Samuel from Kampala, Uganda wants to know that is there any correlation between medical tourism and telemedicine? I don't know how valid that question is.
Excellent question. Very good question. I'm delighted you gave that question. I'll answer it in two parts. Yes, sir. If you have an excellent telemedicine unit, the medical tourism of India will go down. Most CEOs of hospitals do not like me for the simple reason that physical footfalls to a hospital will come down. So, if telemedicine is really developed in a very big way, you can avoid, reduce the number of people leaving your country and going to another country. That is one part of the story. Second part of the story is with telemedicine, follow-up can be done. I personally feel very bad that we have so many patients from Uganda. Yes, treatment cannot be done in Uganda. Treatment can only be done in Chennai, for example. But a follow-up, you need not come accompanied by 2 or 3 people from Uganda all the way to Chennai just to see the scar, just to do this. So 80% of follow-up can be done at your own country. For this, you need an excellent telemedicine unit. So the two are related very much.
We have a question from Dr. Janaka Abhesinghe from Sri Lanka. For a physician, the general physical examination, palpitation, or auscultations form so important part of their diagnosis. Can it be done using teleconsultation? Can it be done using telemedicine?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for a very nice question. I'm very happy that in 2020, somebody, I don't know how old you are, but I'm very happy that in 2020, somebody still believes in clinical examination. I was a medical student from 1968 to 1973. I was the last neurosurgeon in India who was trained before the CT scan came to India. So I totally believe in clinical examination. Having said that, in the year 2020, life is slightly different, and in the years to come, it will even be different. Auscultation, inspection, palpation, percussion, auscultation. Inspection can be done from 5,000 miles away, 10,000 miles away. That just depends on the lighting of the room, a good camera, the camera to be focused, etc. So I can assure you that inspection can be done just as you will do in a face-to-face encounter. Palpation. Now, palpation, a very small nodule, 4 centimeter by 3 centimeter, yes, you will not be able to palpate. But today, sir, whether you like it or not, a good ultrasound, maybe a chest x-ray, there are so many other investigations which will give you much more about the morphology. I showed you a picture, if you remember, a multinodular goiter. Now, an ultrasound of this multinodular goiter with a Doppler will actually show me the vascularity of the thyroid gland, will tell me whether there are cystic areas, will tell me whether the thyroid is calcified, whether it is solid, cystic, multicystic. Whatever information a thyroid surgeon wants, a good ultrasound will be able to give me. That is so far as palpation is concerned. Now, if you have ascites of the abdomen, if you have distended veins, yes, hepatomegaly, splenomegaly, rectal exam, vaginal examination, all that, piles, hemorrhoids, all that may not be able to do remotely. But the equivalent of that can be done with ultrasound, etc. Percussion, honestly, other than teaching medical students, I don't even know whether they do it today. Auscultation, 200% auscultation can be done remotely, much better than if you have two earpieces of a stethoscope in your ear. There it is entirely subjective. We depend on your audiological skills. I assume that you can pick up a third heart sound, a fourth heart sound, a mid-diastolic murmur, a pan-systolic murmur. Why depend on an individual's competence? Today, with a digital stethoscope, the sound is transmitted in real time. I can hear it through a speaker, and it is not Ganapathy which hears it through a speaker. It is 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 doctors who can hear it through a speaker. And if I miss the diagnosis, somebody else will miss the pick up the diagnosis. And also, like an ECG, an audio file can come to you with a semi-automated diagnosis. I hope that answers your question. Inspection, palpation, percussion, auscultation, mensuration. Mensuration can also be done remotely.
We have a question from Dr. San Win from South Asia. The question goes, do we need to take consent from a patient while doing a teleconsult? If yes, what is the procedure?
Right. Now, these rules are also country specific. I hope in my lifetime, the World Health Organization, United Nations will get together and somehow ensure that there are international rules. At the moment, the rules in India have been notified only on 25th March. The rule very clearly states that if the patient initiates the consultation, in other words, I am giving an opinion directly to the patient, then no specific consent is required. The logic is very simple. When a patient comes to see me in the hospital, in my clinic, in my outpatient chambers, and I'm sure that what little I have seen of patients in Sri Lanka and Uganda and other places I visited, the same rule holds good in your countries. You do not get a written consent. It's an implied consult. You don't get a consent for taking a patient's blood pressure. You don't even get a consent for doing a rectal exam or a vaginal exam. You don't need a consult for testing his hemoglobin or urea, sugar, creatinine, etc. If you want an arterial blood sample, if you want to do, I don't think you get a consent even for a chest X-ray, ultrasound, etc. The same rule holds good for a teleconsultation. However, if the teleconsultation is a second opinion, in other words, the primary physician is consulting me as a specialist, or if the caretaker, or if a relative or the healthcare provider is consulting me, then you need an e-consent. You need a consent either from the patient directly or from the patient's guardian. For example, you cannot do a teleconsultation for anybody who is less than 18 years old, because in India, legally, you become an adult only on your 18th birthday. So anybody younger than 18, you must get a consult from his parents or guardian.
Right. There is a question that can we do teleconsults for patients with mental illnesses?
Excellent question. I'll ask a counter question. Now, the very fact that the patient had a mental illness means he's unlikely to be mentally capable of asking you for a teleconsultation, right? Therefore, if a person is mentally incapable of asking you for a teleconsultation, you need to get a consent from the person who asked you for the teleconsultation. And you need to be sure, convince yourself that the person asking asking for the teleconsultation is legally allowed to ask. In other words, it must be his spouse, father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, etc. Be very, very wary if the employer or a colleague. I would not give a teleconsultation to somebody who's mentally not capable, who's demented or anything like that, if an employer or an employee asks for that consultation. So again, it's individual, customized. Just use your common sense. Whatever is your gut feeling, go ahead and do it.
I think Dr. Deepal Pereira, your question is answered that how can we examine pediatric patients? Dr. Ganapathy has already answered that we need to take a consent from their parents or their guardians, right? Because if they are less than 18 years old. Now, coming to the next question, Dr. James Munthali wants to have access to the document which was released in India and on 25th of March, telemedicine guidelines. So he wants to know about it.
Very simple. Just you can repeat it, Dr. Rajat. Ministry of Health Family Welfare, mohfw.gov.in. Please just log in. On the home screen, you will find it. You can download it. It's available to everybody. It's a PDF document.
Okay, coming on to this COVID era, can a doctor prescribe COVID test online? That's the question.
Excellent question. Excellent question. I was asked the same question 3 days ago. Now, this is culture sensitive. I honestly not competent to answer. The answer will vary country to country. I have no idea. In fact, I don't even have a definite answer in India. But the answer I gave in India was, why are you in India? It's a public health. The government of India has notified no doctor can treat a COVID-19 patient by himself. The moment you suspect COVID-19, the law demands, whoever you are, the law demands that you notify the government. So I don't think it's correct for a private practitioner to prescribe a test for COVID. Your responsibility is to inform the government hospital that you suspect it and leave it to them, and they will look after it.
There is a question, we have questions on this from many doctors, that is there any different way of writing a tele-prescription, or the same goes, the normal prescription which we use in our physical interactions, the same would work for a teleconsult?
Again, sir, I am not competent. The answer may differ from country to country. I honestly do not know. In India, the rules are very, very clear. It is enough. There are various options. It is enough if you write a normal prescription on your letterhead with your signature, your registration number, your state medical council, the name of the patient, age, sex, working diagnosis, the dosage, the name of the tablet, generic name, carbamazepine, I told you, not the various trade names, etc. You can then take a photograph with an ordinary mobile phone or scan it. It's entirely up to you how you do it, etc. And then the photograph can be sent by email, by WhatsApp, by SMS, by any other thing. If you are using an EMR, an electronic medical record, it will be part of your medical record. So an ordinary prescription is enough. Take a photograph and send it.
There is a question related to neurology, sir. I think you'll be very much interested, being a neurosurgeon, from Dr. D. Veera Sekara. How can we assess a patient complaining of neurological symptoms like numbness or tingling?
I have done this personally on at least 50, 60 people. I would have tested for, including perianal anesthesia when I suspected a particular case with L5S1 involved. Of course, you need privacy, etc., etc. It is not. I showed you in that video. In the video I showed you just when I was giving my talk. I examined for trigeminal anesthesia. Very simple. Ask the relative himself or herself to take a cotton and a pin, and you direct it C5 dermatome, C6 dermatome, C7 dermatome, T1, T4, whatever it is, etc. Custom, of course, I don't do this in every case. I do this only if clinically indicated for a peripheral nerve lesion. I have made a diagnosis of ulnar nerve involvement, radial nerve involvement, medial nerve involvement, etc. Just do as you normally do, excepting that instead of you stroking the dermatome with a cotton wool or a pin, Ask the patient himself, herself to do it, or a relative to do it. What's the problem?
Dr. Janaka Vikrama Ratne wants to have an opinion from your end, being you being into telemedicine for so long. In Sri Lanka, where one can find a doctor within 10 minutes, within a kilometer's range, what importance does it hold in Sri Lanka? The first question. The second question is he wants to have an idea about some softwares, which probably you might be knowing, sir. PACS, that is Picture Archiving and Communication System, DICOM, Digital Imaging and Communications in Medicine.
The first question, I'm surprised. I have been to Sri Lanka a couple of times. I don't think rural Sri Lanka or suburban Sri Lanka, you will find doctors every few kilometers. I'm extremely surprised. And I don't think whole of Sri Lanka, Kandy, I've been to Kandy, I remember, Jaffna, Kandy, etc. I don't know. You must be the better person. Okay, even in a situation like that, see, just imagine the difficulty in going in a car, going in a bus, going in a rickshaw, parking your car, the petrol, the pollution, the consumption, waiting outside the doctor's room for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, even if a time has been given for you for appointment, etc. One, two, I as a doctor, when I was in practice, I used to spend 45 minutes traveling up, 45 minutes traveling down. And when I used to visit multiple nursing homes, I used to spend 3 hours a day just on travel. It was such a pain, so difficult. I mean, today I can work from home. I mean, I'm giving consultations from my house. I'm able to do everything. So it is a matter of comfort, work from home. So that answers your question on telemedicine. What is the second part?
The second, I also forgot. The second part was, we'll come to that later. So as a specialist of telemedicine, what is the single most important advice you will give to our upcoming budding teleconsultants?
The first advice, second advice, and third advice is you cannot learn swimming by a postal course. If you want to learn swimming, you have to get into the water, not an online course, not a postal course. I can give a lecture for 2 hours on deep sea diving, but unless I do deep sea diving, I cannot get it. So please get into it. The more the difficulties, the more the fun it is for me to overcome them. We would never have reached this stage if I had said, okay, I mean, the thousands of problems which we had 20 years ago. So whether you like it or not, in 10 years from now or 5 years from now, it will be a rare patient who physically comes to a doctor. Remote healthcare will be the primary modality of delivering healthcare all over the world. If you want a first mover advantage, you better get into telemedicine not today, but yesterday.
Okay, we'll take the question which both of us forgot. The question was from Dr. Janaka Vikrama Ratne. He wants to know about the softwares PACS, that is Picture Archiving and Communication System, DICOM, that is Digital Imaging and Communications in Medicine.
I don't understand the question. This is, I mean, just Google, you will get all the details. This is an international standard for teleradiology. So this is an international standard whereby X-ray, CT scans, MRI, ultrasound, mammograms, etc. can be compressed, decompressed, and at wherever you are. So today, unless you have a PACS to every single X-ray, digital X-ray machine, every single ultrasound, CT, MRI, mammogram, etc., manufactured after 2008 or 10, I don't remember, somewhere on that period, mandatory that it has to be DICOM PACS compatible.
We have a question from Dr. Samira Patirana from Sri Lanka. We know our Indian guidelines were enforced on 25th of March. Are there some guidelines which are followed for telemedicine? The doctor.
Sorry, I lost you. Can you repeat?
Sir, the question is that in India, we know that we have been following the Indian guidelines which have been released on 25th of March. So are there some global guidelines which are being followed across the world?
There is no, to the best of my knowledge, international telemedicine guidelines. United States has passed great rules. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of rules specific for every state long ago. Malaysia was the first country in the world to pass laws in 1997. The European Union, most countries in Europe have their own telemedicine laws, and many countries have. Abu Dhabi has its own telemedicine rules. So many countries do have.
Okay, my follow-up question, this is the question from my side, sir. How the notification of India, which has been released on 25th of March, made a difference to the world's perspective? What is your opinion on this?
Two reasons. India is the world. Every sixth human being on planet Earth lives in India. We represent 1/6 of the world. The world cannot ignore India. So that is one. The second reason, of course, is there are many countries. I'm sure that all the 6 countries, to the best of my knowledge, none of the 6 countries from whom we are getting people, I don't think the government has notified. I may be wrong. So I think this is a step. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Southeast Asian countries, many countries. There are about 195 countries in the United Nations. I think this move of India will result in many countries also formalizing and notifying telemedicine rules, for the simple reason that the COVID-19 has infected 99% of the world, and therefore I think this will become law in all your countries as well.
So we could have gone on and on for some more time, but my last question for the day is, what do you feel are these telemedicine guidelines or the upcoming role of telemedicine across the world going to stay, or would it vanish post COVID-19 pandemic is over?
It is going to stay till the next pandemic comes 100 years from now. In the history of the earth, a pandemic comes every 100 years. The last pandemic was in 1912. The world is turned upside down. The world is changed, whether you like it or not. Many airlines have gone out of business. British Airways is retrenching people. Airports are going to close down. Buses are going to close down. The world is going to change. And this is not pandemic specific, because the pandemic is leaving such a major disaster trail. For the next 100 years, this will be there definitely.
I certainly agree with you, sir, that Corona or COVID-19 is not the first virus which has struck humanity, and it is certainly not going to be the last. So with these words, I would like to come to the end of this session. But before we close, my heartiest thanks to our revered speaker, Professor K. Ganapathy, who has added such a value to all of us by giving the practical tips, his experience over the last 20 years on telemedicine. And I also thank all our viewers from 6 nations, Zambia, Uganda, Kenya, Myanmar, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka, for joining with us, sharing their valuable thoughts with their questions, making this session so insightful and interactive. We have been blessed to have this session today. Thank you, one and all. We would end this session here.